Heavy fighting continues in Ukraine's eastern Donbass. In his nightly address, President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Russia launched over 400 strikes across the region on Sunday alone. Investigators in Kyiv say more than 8,000 civilians have been killed since the war began, but they warn that actual casualties are likely to be much higher. Their report comes as a series of explosions rocked the occupied nuclear power plant in Zaporizhzhia, renewing concerns over the safety of Europe's largest nuclear facility. Now, the southern region of Kherson was recently liberated by the Ukrainians after 8 months of Russian occupation. More than a week after Russian troops retreated, the city of Kherson and its surrounding villages are now slowly returning to life. DW's Nick Connolly visited the region, including the village of Blahodatne, the scene of some of the worst fighting in the region.
This is the road to Kherson, or what's left of it. For months, Russia and Ukraine fought tooth and nail for every metre here. In the end, Russia's forces collapsed, unable to cope with Ukraine's relentless attacks on their supply lines. But victory has come at a steep price. This village was just behind the Ukrainian forward positions. Intact houses are the exception here. Rockets like these are just one of the dangers. Many more are hidden. Heading towards Kherson, we cross what until a week ago was the front line. The Ukrainian army wants to show us that they take care not to hit civilians in their homes, unlike their Russian opponents. This village, Blahodatne, is certainly in much better shape than the one we've just left, even though until recently it was home to a Russian base. After so many months cut off from the outside world, people here are glad to finally tell their stories.
The Russians would break into houses, empty them, take anything they came across. They could stop you on your bike and just take it off you. The same with phones. As soon as it got dark, you just had to lay low. If we saw them, we'd turn around and make ourselves scarce.
Most of this village's residents couldn't get used to the fighting and life under occupation. But leaving wasn't an option for everyone.
What about my animals? Who would I have left my chickens, my goats, my piglets with? What do I do about my cows? Lots of people here left after a husband and wife were killed. First, a shell killed the husband at home, and 40 days later, his widow was killed by another shell in the same house.
We meet Irina. She works at the village school, which Russian soldiers took over as their base. She's just been inside for the first time and wants to show us.
They obviously thought there'd be cash in here, but all they found were our social security papers. They took all the laptops, all the technology, it's all gone.
Irina grew up here and came back to work at the school more than 15 years ago. She takes to see a parting message left by the Russian soldiers. The handwriting may be neat, but the language is anything but. In drastic terms, it blames the Ukrainians for the war and accuses them of killing women and children before concluding, "We'll meet in hell. Next time, you won't get away from us." Even after months on the ground in Ukraine, at least some of the Russian troops still apparently believe what their commanders and Russian TV are telling them.
The Russians would repeat the same thing to us over and over. "We came here to liberate you. Who have you liberated me from?" I'd ask them. "My life was fine until you came. Now I'm not living anymore. I'm just surviving, trying to work out if I'll die or live to see another day. Everything was good until you Russians came."
And now the Russians really are gone, people here are remarkably confident that the Ukrainian army is back for good. But it's not just the Russians that are gone. The children that used to fill these classrooms are also gone, scattered across Ukraine and the whole of Europe. For now, they and their parents are in no hurry to come home.
I'm joined now by Mike Martin. He's a former British Army officer and a senior fellow at the War Studies Department at King's College London. Hi there, Mike. Some calm returning to parts of Kherson, as we just saw, but of course there's the reports of ongoing Russian artillery attacks in the area and then the heavy fighting in the eastern Donbass region.
Yes, I think what's happened is now that the Russians have pulled out of Kherson, both sides, both Russia and Ukraine, have realised that it's very difficult to make advances in that area. The Russians have built up fortifications. Obviously, the Ukrainians now hold Kherson. And so that front line is settling down to one where there probably won't be any big offensives, but both sides are lobbing artillery at each other. The activity, actually, in a strategic sense, is over in the east, in the Donbass, where the Russians, for the last couple of months, actually, have been trying to make progress so far unsuccessfully against the Ukrainian front lines.
So we know that the Russians have pulled back in Kherson, but they're not far away. Why is Kherson so important?
Kherson was taken in the second day of the war, and it was the only big city that the Russians controlled. It's the only regional capital. It's also the only big area on the western side of the river Dnipro, which runs right the way through Ukraine from Crimea all the way up to Kyiv. And so now that the Russians have left that was a huge setback for them, because that area would have been a springboard for further attacks all the way along the Black Sea coast, so into Mykolaiv and into Odessa.
Now, we know that there is still lots of concern about the shelling around the now Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Do we know if it's the Russians or the Ukrainians doing the shelling? And really, do we need to be worried about this?
In short, we don't. The International Atomic Agency has a team in the plant, and they are currently conducting investigations. It's not clear whether it's the Ukrainians or the Russians. I don't think we should be any more worried than we have been, but obviously a nuclear power plant in a war zone is problematic. But that area around Zaporizhzhia is actually one of the areas of likely future offensives, because neither side on that southern front line has reinforced greatly or dug in big fortifications. So that is probably where we'll see an offensive at some point in the next 6 months.
OK, so somewhere to watch. We'll have to leave it there. Mike Martin from King's College London, thanks so much.
Thanks, Anya.